Hello and welcome to the Monday, February 2nd, 2026 edition of the SANS Internet Storm Center's Stormcast. My name is Johannes Ulrich, recording today from Jacksonville, Florida. And this episode is brought to you by the SANS.edu undergraduate certificate program in applied cybersecurity. Last week, I started adding some CAPTCHAs to the Internet Storm Center website. I had to do it. I didn't really want to do with CAPTCHAs and such, but we did get a ton of requests that basically just screen scrape some pages that are available via APIs and some of our public data feeds. So please use those if you need the data, or let me know if you run into any problems with the CAPTCHAs. It did cut down the load on these particular pages by over 90%. So more than 9 out of 10 requests to those pages were created by bots. In diaries today, we had, one from Friday, and that's about a little phishing trick that at least was new to me. So whenever any company is setting up a simple way to host free web pages, it's often being abused for phishing. Google Documents, not really an exception here. Google Docs, I think, is the official name. But what Google actually did to prevent some of this is to add a very obvious note to the bottom of each page that this is hosted by Google Docs, and also links to report phishing pages. Well, one of our readers, Charlie, he observed a phishing email that redirected to a Google Docs page that did not have this notice. And there was a fairly simple trick that was played here. At first, I thought maybe they played some HTML trick or such to hide it, some style sheet or whatever. Well, what they did in this case was they used a Google Slides presentation. And these presentations, yes, also have sort of a very distinct footer by default, but you can publish these presentations. Once you publish the presentation, well, then they sort of work like a presentation that you would present to an audience. So this footer disappears. And that's exactly what they used here. They used a link to a published presentation. Links still work in those presentations, so you can still click on the link. This one targeted users of Vivaldi webmail. Not really clear, like the user sent it to us. I believe they are a user of Vivaldi webmail. I'm not sure if this was targeted to Vivaldi webmail users. There was a comment asking about that. And I think what may have happened, what often happens with phishing emails like this, is that they were sent to a lot of people, not just Vivaldi webmail users, but those who don't use Vivaldi webmail, they just discard email because they knew it's obviously bad. While Charlie here, as a user of Vivaldi webmail, paid a little bit more attention and took a closer look at that particular email. So there's always that kind of confirmation bias here that plays a role when you're looking at phishing. And I guess it's time for another Ivanti vulnerability patch and exploit again. So we do have an already exploited vulnerability in Ivanti's Endpoint Manager Mobile. This affects version 12.5, 12.6, 12.7, 0, as well as 1 for this particular product. The patch that's being released here is what they call an RPM patch. Basically, well, the RPM package manager, just a file for that. Now, it's not a new version that you're getting here. You're just getting the patch. If you're now upgrading to a different version, well, you have to reapply the patch. They're calling this sort of a temporary patch, really. Now, when they're releasing a new version next time, and they don't really state when that'll happen, then the patch should be included in that new version, so it shouldn't really become an issue. It's really only if you would basically essentially downgrade or maybe upgrade to another vulnerable version, like if you are currently on 12.6 and you're upgrading to a vulnerable 12.7 version, that could lead to this downgrade. So definitely pay attention then to the final patch being released in a new version. Another sort of advantage of this patch is also that it doesn't require any downtime. Now, if you are sort of in a failover high availability configuration, you have to apply the patch to all cores. The patch does not automatically replicate to the other instances. And Microsoft has published an updated timeline on the removal and actually disabling of NTLM from future versions of Windows. Now, you may say, well, haven't they already had a timeline so far? They were so far talking about deprecating NTLM, which means it's no longer sort of used by default, doesn't receive any updates, and it's basically no longer sort of a maintained feature. It's just being kept around for people who still need it. What they started doing now already is add more logging, so basically enhanced auditing for NTLM, so it's easier to identify systems that still use it. And in the second half of 2026, they'll move to actually then preferring Kerberos, so always try Kerberos first before they would try NTLM. And then in the next version of Windows Server, they'll actually move to disable NTLM. So you probably have about a year or so to really deal with that issue and try to get rid of as much NTLM in your network as possible. NTLM will not be removed as far as I understand. You'll still be able to enable it, but it will require additional sort of administrative overhead to actually get NTLM to work in later versions or newer versions of Windows. Well, that's it for today. Two stories that didn't make sort of the cut are vulnerability in Johnson Controls MetaSys. That's one of their sort of commercial automation systems. And then also lots of news with vulnerabilities and such about Moldbot, yet another one of those AI tools. Well, almost feels like that's sort of part of their PR campaign. But either way, if you're working with any of these systems, take a look. That's it for today. If I should have covered another news item, so please let me know and talk to you again tomorrow. Bye.